Hey everyone, I'm gonna go through League. I went 4-1 as a spoiler. I think that had some interesting lines in it. So I'm gonna play through the Wizards playback and see if that goes a little bit quicker and a little bit easier. But this is the deck I was running with the Tezzerator build. The main difference between most people's normal list is I'm running a cage in the main, both to battle Storm and to battle kind of collected company type decks, and it's also not dead against Death Shadow, whereas Pithing Needle tends to be pretty dead against Death Shadow. So this card could single-handedly beat collected company decks pretty hard. Playing 3 Brutality, no Inquisitions. Going to probably try around Inquisitions a little bit. I actually just recently for this league, I cut a Pentad Prism to run an extra land, and I'm trying out a Glimmer Void. It's been pretty relevant for me to try out this Glimmer Void. I really just always want extra lands. Whenever I have a bridge, I just need more lands so I can play my spells. When I have Thopter Founded combo, I just want more lands. So I think 21 lands is probably actually where I want to be. Other than that, in the sideboard, Padim's been really good. Fourth Tezzerator, I think, is probably the best alternate win con. I tried out with Heralds and Aether Grid and some things like that, but just Tezzerator's too good when he's good. So he's also the fastest way to really beat like Tron or Scapeshift or something like that. I'm a very big fan of Chalice. A very big fan of this split of green spells on Witchbane Herb's been pretty great for me too. So I'm going to see if I could figure out how to replay some of these. So I'm going to go through this. See how this works. Okay, so replaying this, and this is. Things are going very fast. Okay, that's good. So this is Grixis Death Shadow, and basically my opponent took my Mox Opal thinking that I had a one-lander and that I wouldn't be able to get there because I only had one lander. They then also wanted to stub my Prism because, again, they think that my only way to actually do anything is with this Whir. I'm kind of fine with this because all of these other spells are all, like, these two are very much need to kill them, right? So I'm okay trading mana. Those are actually cards I side out in the matchup normally. So I proceed to draw some lands, get a bridge in play. Opponent has just kind of spun the wheels a lot. Hasn't really done too much, just thought scouring a bunch of times. Vision Zing, all that kind of stuff. Take our Whir, that's fine. So luckily we just draw the combo so we can actually end the game quicker. But I think we're still fine from this spot. We're sitting behind a bridge. We're going to take away likely their Kolaghan's Command or their, counterspell, and then just chill out for a bit. But now we have really Thopter combo, and it's pretty straightforward. They do get us to 1 with their Kolaghan's Command, but they don't really have a way to beat it whenever I untap with Thopters, right? So I have 4 plus Thopters. They don't really have a good answer to that. So they did have the Kolaghan's Command. They kind of had the best shot they could, but if we would have taken one more painted damage somewhere, then we would have lost. So the rest of this game is pretty straightforward. Just make Thopters and attack them. So all right. So let's go to. I guess the only way to really do it is. So I don't like that this playback doesn't really show you sideboarding decisions, but my plan against Death Shadow is just to really board out the Pentad Prisms, board out Moxes, and actually sometimes trimming down a Tez because he's just not very good. We'll pull up the list to talk through it. So I normally cut 3 Mox Opals and 3 Pentad Prisms in the Time Sieve, because just none of those really do anything. You don't need the Time Sieve to win. They can't really beat the Thopter combo once you untap with it. And I also cut out Brutalities because they don't kill anything, so it's basically just a 2-mana duress, and you don't really have the time against them. So that's 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We bring in Padim, Damnation, Thought Seizes. I actually didn't bring these in for the longest time, but they are a way to take their only threat or to take the Kolaghan's Command. Chalice is really, really good. And then I actually bring in all these green spells, and I think I cut something else. I don't remember what it was. I normally cut the 4th Prism, but I think in this spot I might have cut either like a Mishra's Bauble or probably actually I think it was actually this Tez because I didn't want too many 4-drops. And Tez actually isn't even really great against them. So against this deck, normally I do these things. Okay. Just because I wanted to be more controlling. I didn't want as many dead draws because they're obviously going to Inquisition us a bunch of times. We really just want to stick a bridge, protect it, or somehow get the combo going. A lot of times they'll actually try and surgical your combo, which is annoying, but just bridge protecting it is really, really strong. And that's actually really where Padim's been phenomenal for me, is not even just drawing extra cards, but giving your stuff hexproof. They don't really have a way to kill a 1/4 left in their deck. It's pretty rare for them to keep in Terminates, but yeah, normally, like I said, the only kind of strange thing here, the most strange thing is siding out a Tezzerator. Like, you can sometimes randomly get them by attacking with a 5/5. That's much more relevant when you have prisms and random artifacts lying around. Most of my artifacts I actually want to be using for their ability. And then they can just always kill it. Like, it's always one attack from whatever creature they have. So it's a great way to win a long game, and you need some in your deck in case they surgical your combo. But it's not great, and definitely never want to have two. And if I'm bringing in a 4-drop, two 4-drops actually in Damnation, I really would like to trim some. So let's go back to. So in this game, this is game 2, right? So my plan is just to really want to hit land drops. They're gonna rip our hand apart, and I just want to try and hit my land drops. So I've actually got way too many high cost spells, so I'm pretty concerned here. Really like a cheap interactive spell like an Abrupt Decay. Or my opponent just to keep doing this, because that's fine. This is negative tempo for them, right? So they're using their mana to take my free spells. So I'm okay with this exchanging. Obviously they're losing life and arguably trimming down my stuff, but they just keep doing their plan. So now actually it's a little bit rough because I'm stuck with 2 Whirs, which don't actually do anything. Chalice is basically the best draw in my deck, I would think. Even a combo piece or something like that isn't better than a land, but Chalice is something that by itself it can function on 2 lands, and basically just start locking them out from here. So let's proceed a bit. They play their Tassiger, pretty scary. I need to draw a land and be able to get a bridge out soon. So we found a land, Flooded Strand off the top. Boop. Bunch of stuff, jump back. Okay, so to back up what happened here, I drew the Flooded Strand. I then was able to whir for a Foundry, and I wanted to get Foundry first just in case, I do draw a sword, then they have some counter or something like that later on. I wanted to be able to protect it. Plus, I could randomly sack this Bauble to block if I need to buy some time. Following that, I drew a Maelstrom Pulse, which we're using on their dude. If I remember correctly, they activate their Tassiger here. And the funny part is, if they don't activate Tassiger, they actually draw their Biforce, which would just obliterate us. So I happily give them back their Inquisition. And, yeah, so this game starts spiraling out for them. They get a fish, but again, so I can either just get a bridge here, or I can get the combo and take 5. So I actually get the bridge because I had a similar scenario earlier where I could have gotten the combo, and then they end up killing my piece, and it makes it a lot harder because I now need to whir for another piece. Whereas, like, I'm not under enough pressure if I keep the bridge, and they have to have a call against command. I end up drawing this just to, of course, have 1 extra Thopter, but I think our opponent even knew we had the other whir, right? So make Thopters and just kind of go off from here. So that's really how I want the games against Dash Shadow to play out, is game 1, just try and stick something like a bridge or combo. They can't really beat it, except for Call Against Command, which our opponent did have. And then game 2, try and use a Chalice to strand some cards in their hand. Our opponent had Inquisition, at least 1, and we had multiple Whirs, so it would have been good against us if we didn't have this Chalice. And then the game just is going to progress where our opponent's drawing stuff that could be air, could be discard spells. We're trying to just draw all of our spells being live. A lot of times I'll use these baubles and save them until I don't have anything to do, so now I can protect my card that I draw from the bauble from a discard spell, right? In this matchup, it's not that I need to keep it in play so that it's under bridge, but I just don't want them to have access to discarding my cards. And here, I don't need the extra card. The only time I'd want an extra card is a land. So because I don't know really what I'm looking for, I'm not trying to crack the bauble yet. But yeah, so the rest of this game, we just make some Thopters and kill our opponent. On to round 2. Alright, round 2. So keep a hand really high cost hand, but I mean, there's just so many things that could go right here. Get a land off the Goblin Guide, obviously, because we're running pretty well there. One note is, a lot of times I'll save baubles or save Mishras or Moxes if I don't really have them online or have a need for them. But anytime you play against a deck gives Goblin Guide, you want to get all your spells that you can out of your hand as quick as possible, right? Because they're going to play an Eidolon as soon as they can. So here we just kind of take our beating for a bit. Of course, get another land, which actually it hurts me sometimes because I've had plenty of games where I just get too many lands off their Goblin Guide, and now my bridge doesn't work, right? So our opponent has double Eidolon, which is atrocious for them because I'm not casting spells for the rest of this game. So I intend to block them. And in fact, if our opponent attacks with these Eidolons, I do not intend to actually block them. So I think that our opponent is actually sufficiently locked from this point. I can now start attacking and make more guys. So this game was in large part because we were on the play, I believe. So if this game was reversed and we were on the draw, we might not have had enough time to be able to whir for the sword piece, right? But a lot of times that hand would have been too slow against them as well because it only had 2 lands in the Thopter piece and a whir. So I had to draw a 0-drop and I had to draw a land for being able to get the combo going. So we luckily did, but you see how Tezza's just kind of rotting your hand for a lot of the game here too. So a lot of times versus Burn, let's go back to the deck list. What I side is, let's see. So I do, let's go back to this. So I board out, definitely Time Sieve, card doesn't do anything. Board out these things. Actually, a lot of times I board out all the Visions. Sometimes I'll keep in one just because I need a card to keep in. But Visions is just, it's spending time to get better draws. And we don't have time because they're burned. And secondly, it could just actually be dealing us damage because they have an Eidolon in play as well, right? So the cards I bring in are, I bring in the 2 Abrupt Decays because, no, come back here. I bring in the 2 Abrupt Decays because they, some people play like Rest in Peace or, you know, or Kataki, just random stuff that you need to be ready to be able to deal with. It's also not a terrible removal spell because I'm intending to put Chalice on 2. So by putting Chalice on 2, I am kind of locking out my brutalities, and this is a way to still kill stuff through that. And other than that, Witchbane Orb obviously stops some of their stuff. I haven't really had this be as extremely relevant here, but obviously having Hexproof against Burn is pretty good. So I normally would do something like this. So these 6 out and these 6 in. So then let's go to game 2. Alright, so this is game 2 against Burn. This hand had just infinite mana, so didn't really do anything. Double Mox is also mulligan already. This hand's already got a lot of mana, but it can be really explosive because on turn 2 I can have a Mox and have a Prism. So when I untap on 3, I'll have access to 6 mana, which is a lot, but I really need to have an action piece, right? So we draw Brutality, which is basically the best card in the matchup. Again, play all my stuff just because they might play their Eidolon. I'm actually not positive here if I wanted to do that because I kind of want to use this to kill or to pitch some of these cards, like pitching the Opal. But at this point, I kind of want to pitch the Prism as well. I don't really need 6 mana with having the Brutality as something to interact with on 2. So opponent did have the Eidolon. We fetch. So I draw a Whir, which in and of itself doesn't stop what our opponent's doing, right? I need another piece of the combo. Bridge isn't insane. I'll eventually hopefully get to the the Witchbane Orb, and I make a weird decision where I discard the land instead of the Prism, because next turn I can go 2 mana, play the Prism, have my 3rd mana, still do 3 mana, and then 1/2 for the Whir, so I can Whir for 2 next turn. I can do that as well with the land, but I would have to shock myself. So my thought process is that this way is going to save 2 life if I want to Whir, unless my opponent has an Eidolon. I don't know how confident I am on this being correct. They then do have the Eidolon, and it ends up being, I believe, way worse, because now I have, I mean, like, I still have this Mox on, but it's a little bit too slow here, because let's go through this. So my opponent just gunning me down, go to 1, and just, you know, I can Whir, right, get my piece, but then I basically need to, I can't Whir for my other piece, right, because I'm going to die. So I need to basically do this, and I'm just in a really bad spot. So I arguably should have kept the land. I think that I definitely should have kept the land from the Brutality, because if I do that, now I'd be able to Whir, have an extra mana source once the Opal's online with the sword, so that way I can Whir, get the sword, have 1 mana, and basically I'm putting myself to my opponent bricking on this draw step, right? Meaning that I could gain a life from the sacking the sword, block the Eidolon if it attacks, and just hope that they don't have a spell, and any spell I'm at 1, right, it's going to kill me anyway. So I think that would have been a better line. Opponent ended up having Skullcrack anyway, right, so it doesn't matter, but like, arguably now this line is slightly better, but I'm just dead, right? So I think I should have gone the other way. It gives me more outs that way. This way I kind of have outs, but I'm sacking too many of my artifacts to be able to do anything with it. So, alright, so let's go to game 3. Alright, so this is game 3 against Burn. We're on the play, and this hand is phenomenal, right? Brutality is great against them in general. Chalice is great against them. So this hand is what we want to be doing. So weird play there is I want more lands to be able to Chalice on 2. Like I said, I like Chalicing on 2 more than anything else. I bobbled myself before fetching, and if it was not a land, I was going to fetch to try and find a land to draw something for the guide. Because one of the best things is when you have a Brutality, guide just giving you free, like a free land, right, makes it infinitely better. So we just now have all of the things we could ever want. And I choose to play the Chalice out on 1 first. I actually very rarely play Chalice on 1 against Burn. I really just use it as a KO to play Chalice on 2, because then it stops all the destructive revelries that they definitely brought in, and any other hate pieces, things like that. Our opponent has Rest in Peace, like I talked about before, that I normally bring an Abrupt Decay for. So pretty interesting that they have that. Definitely stops the combo and is mildly annoying. But again, my game plan is to actually go for a lock with the Chalice on 2. So we're fine with this. We don't need to kill our opponent, right? So we Brutality'd for full value, discarded the Pentad Prism and a Swamp that we had extra. See a bunch of 1-drops and take whatever, I think it was Rift Bolt. I take Rift Bolt just because odds are they'll probably draw a 2-mana spell, and I don't want them to go 1-2, right? I want them to draw 2-mana spell, so it's 2-2, so that way next turn I can play my Chalice. Just kind of like gains us 3 life, arguably. So we keep on doing this. I draw Tez, which is kind of good. I mean, it has an actual win condition, whereas the other win condition would be Chalicing on 2, right? But our opponent can't really beat this, right? So even though they have this Rest in Peace, we will eventually find a way to kill them, which is our Tez, and they don't really have an answer for Chalice on 1 and Chalice on 2. So, alright, on to round 3. Alright, so round 3, I have a pretty good hand, right? It has Brutality, can do some Mox. Like if I draw a 0-drop, I can play Tez on 3, and end up playing against Affinity with a very fast start. So very happy to see Steel Overseer, just something to Brutality, right? Draw the Pentad Prism, again, doesn't really do much until we draw this worse. So now we actually have combo pieces active. Take our 7. We're going to... So I end step, get to fetch for my island. So I get to use the Mox for improvise rather than for mana. Because, again, Pentaprism +1s your whir. So this +1s, this +1s. So we get to actually whir for 3, or for 2, 1 turn 3 here. To get our Thopter Foundry, and then we'll have Sword Online. So, regardless of the fact they have a 7-1, we don't really care, right? Because now we have Infinite Thopters going on, and 4 mana. 4 mana is just plenty of mana to stop anything they try to do. So, domes us, make some guys. They have even more powerful people, but I think it's a really weird attack, because I guess their play is that we just forget we can make Thopters or something, but I would gladly trade 2 Thopters with their only creatures, right? I play Tez because it puts the most aggressive clock on them, because if I plus and then next turn I just make Thopters, they're basically dead. But our opponent had the second Galv Blast, which now just means we have to fair mode them out throughout this, making Thopters, and fair mode is and make more Thopters and keep blocking. Get a bridge, keep bridge on top in case stuff gets weird. But they have a very, very large Master of Ethereum, but my little Thopter will come in the way and block it. And the rest of this game is basically just the fact that we've got a lock, so we even have the backup bridge where they can't do much about it, and we just keep making Thopters, and our opponent can't really keep up with that, so. And they realize that they're going to die. On to game 2. Alright, so this is game 2 against Affinity. Let's go back and talk about how I sideboarded. So, normally what I do against Affinity, let's sort this. So, I basically try to set up a bridge, because bridge is very sticky. Or the combo, right, like normal decks. This card's not very good. Again, these cards are just kind of spinning your wheels like Burn, where Affinity teams be very fast. You do get to some grindy points in the matchup sometimes, but those are the games you're winning, right? The games you're losing are when you spin your wheels and can't get a lock going. Against them, I do not like any of these cards. Decay's great. Kills their pieces when they're not expecting it. Pulse is a little bit too slow, and being sorcery speed, it's just really not that great, especially on the draw. On the play, it's a little bit better. Padeem's pretty good as a way to... They're going to bring an Ancient Grudge. So again, any deck that brings an Ancient Grudge, I basically bring in Padeem as a hexproof way to answer their stuff. And then Damnation is not insane, but it's fine, right? Some of their draws are just spew a bunch of little guys into play. And Damnation helps clean that up. And then Play the Needles are great against just the random Ravengers or Plating or even some Manlands or Aether Grid or stuff like that in the board. So this is how I normally sideboard for them. These cards, right, too slow. Like, these 3 don't matter. These 3 are too slow, and just more interaction. So, all right. So this game, we have a very good hand. Drew our one of Serum Visions. Which is like basically the only time it's good is on turn 1. Drew another Prism, which is not very good. I bottomed both of these because I'm really just looking for a land, and it was like a bridge and something else, and I really just need a 3rd land to be able to play this. I don't really want to be stuck with just using Prisms for mana for next turn and stuff like that. So, I didn't use the Bauble. I probably should have used the Bauble to draw a card to look for another land, but I ended up doing it this turn anyway. I also ended up using both counters to decay that guy. So I took a weird choice here to, because I know my plan is to get the bridge going, right? I fetched and got an island instead of fetching and shocking for a breeding pool and then just casting decay. So I could have taken 2 more damage if I wanted to, but I know that the second Prism's not going to really do anything, and I'm going to want to get the bridge in play no matter what. So I'll save 2 life and filter through the Prism to kill this guy, rather than shocking and keeping a Prism as backup. So, not positive that's right, but it saves me some life, and our opponent appears to be on the beatdown plan, the kind of relatively fair mode beatdown plan, right? So from their perspective, they're going to keep any hand that has a little bit of mana and some little cheap guys, and then one power spell, so either this or a Ravager or Plating, right? Last card could be literally anything except for, I expected at this point to be a piece of interaction or like a Galv Blast or something like that, because any cheap spell they probably would have played. They would have played a 1-drop. They would have played any 0-drop because it'd be battle crying, and I think that they would have played a 2-drop instead of actually tapping and attacking for 2, right? So I expect this to be a piece of interaction, and so I play on my bridge, proceed through this. Again, just kind of filtering through Prism. We don't really need the Prism anymore, and I just want to get it out. Opponent's just chip-shotting us for a bit. We also, so the reason sorry, I didn't explain this. The reason I played the Prism out is because we have this fair. So by playing through the Prism again, I'm probably not going to use it because I already have the 4th mana for these spells, and now starts gaining me a life. So I've essentially used both of these cards as discard 2 cards, gain 3 life, which is pretty bad, actually. But with a bridge, you're just trying to, again, stop what they're doing. Stop them from attacking. So I end up using that life to shock, damnation away this stuff, because this just makes them have absolutely no pressure. It's just really, really slow. The other thing that they... so this is actually a point I was just going to make. The other thing they could have had with one card is a 3-drop. But again, I would have expected them to use the Springleaf Drum and the 2 lands to play their 3-drop. So I still don't think that this is the card that was in their hand, if that makes sense, because they had up 2 lands earlier and the Ornithopter and the Drum, and they chose to attack with a Blink Moth and the Signal Pest for 2 damage rather than play a 3-drop. So I think that they just drew this, and I'm even more convinced that this is an interaction spell. So I'm trying to very quickly get another piece out, so because I think it could be an abrupt or an Ancient Grudge. That's just the scariest one that they could have. Playing a Tez is a bit weird because I could make a 5/5 and I could block. So make a 5/5 and blocking their Pro Colors guy is normally pretty good, but I know that they can't kill Tez, so I want to be able to plus Tez, ideally looking for like a Mox actually. And then having him in play, he's actually going to gain some life if they attack him. And if they don't, like I could just, ultimate gain 8 if I really wanted to, right? So it's a way to gain some life there too. So this game, I... Oh, lost the game. Sorry about that. Alright, back to where I left it off. But our opponent plays a Ravager. Kind of concerning, but like they don't have that many artifacts to sack, and if they're gonna sack artifacts, then they're not gonna have a Pro Colors guy, and our Thopters can block him, right? But at this point, I'm really just trying to play lands and get my hand empty, so then the bridge is online. I'm gonna use Tez to try and buy some time. So this turn is I'm using this to be a 5/5 to block whatever they're doing, right? Or also I kind of want them to make a move with this Ravager, so I'm leaving my options open at the beginning here to either whir for a Needle on the Ravager if I need to. I don't think I need to yet. Or most likely to whir and leave up, so blue, 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 and then these 2, leaving up a mana to get a Thopter Foundry, and then sacking the Prism to get a guy, and then blocking here, blocking a Blink Moth or something like that. So that's my plan, is if they do something where I'm scared I need to stop the Ravager, that's fine. Or I'm just going to intend to get Thopter Foundry. Our opponent finally decides to play the Ancient Grudge that we have been thinking about for a while, and kind of read that they have but weren't positive, so I were for 3 just to, I'm going to tap this guy anyway. I end up sacking this to make a Thopter, I can protect Tez if I really feel like it now. I offer the weird sacrifice here, and the reason I do this is So they don't want to sack the Springleaf Drum, right? Because they need the green mana to be able to interact with my Thopter Foundry, because they actually know I have the sword from Tez. And they also, they don't want to just like let the Ravager die. They could and just put a counter here, but that's very bad for Ensnaring Bridge. Like the counter's bad for them. So I'm doing this block just, I mean, it's kind of like an easy block anyway because Tez is going to die, but I fully expect them to Ancient Grudge. I'm not sure if they're going to Ancient Grudge. I think the Thopter Foundry makes the most sense. We get done tap with our Tez, though, play out a second bridge and a Welding Jar and our sword, and just kind of be in a really good spot. So now sit behind both bridges. Play Rest in Peace, which is pretty annoying because our plan was to get a Foundry with either this or the Tez soon. This is a really interesting decision. So our opponent actually talked to us about this, and I decided to needle. I thought for a while what card they could have, right? So I was thinking either cranial. So there's technically a Ravager in play, right? But if they put counters on something else, that would be fine. And also, it's stopped by its own Rest in Peace, right? So this is just a 2/2. The only thing that this can do is gain counters from these other guys. If this gets bigger, then the bridges are fine. So this card doesn't actually do anything, because even moving the counters around, the Rest in Peace stops the dice trigger. So the line where Affinity can arguably get you is if they go like plating with an Ornithopter. I arguably have the Tez to be able to turn the plating into a 5/5 anyway. So I definitely want to play this just so they can't attack me or attack the Tez. And it's either I name Cranial Plating. I also thought about naming Gear Per Aether Grid. But that's kind of my thought process is that I have the Fair to be able to get another needle, because I have 2 needles, right? Use the Fair to get another needle to be able to play it on the grid if they have it. But it's normally like a 1, maybe 2 of in their sideboard. So I don't expect them to have that. I end up playing the needle on the Cranial Plating just in case they get some weird shenanigans where like they Ornithopter into it, because they would still need like multiple colored sources of mana, and I don't think it's going to matter. But it could have been right just to play it on Aether Grid, because that's the only card that does anything. But one sec. Well, this game doesn't want to continue to play, so what happens is ironically they do draw the Cranial Plating, and so the first draw is Cranial Plating. I end up plus and Tez, do some more stuff, and then they I'm like 2 damage short of killing them. So with the Tez ult, so they end up drawing a Gear Per Aether Grid as a follow-up play, and I intend to during my turn Fair for a needle and play needle, but then I just draw the needle anyway, and they ping Tez down for 2, so you can't ult yet. So I play the needle and grid plus Tez, and then the following turn I Tez ult. So they did have grid, and I think it's probably right to name grid off of this one and save the other one for something else. But yeah, I mean, I felt like we had the game pretty locked up. So just probably would have been slightly better to name the grid on the first one, though. So all right, on to round 4. Alrighty, so this is round 4. I'm against Storm. This hand's really slow, and it doesn't do anything, but I don't think it's a mulligan. Like, this hand would be great against like a Collected Company deck or Eldrazi or something where I'm looking for a certain card, right? Of course, I'm playing on the draw against Storm, which is a very hard matchup. The Thopter combo basically does nothing here. All I'm trying to do is find a Whir, find a Cage, or a Relic or something to interact with their graveyard so they can't kill me quickly. I keep digging and digging and digging, just find a bunch of lands. Find the Whir, which is awkward because I almost didn't want to crack the Bobble, because that means I can Whir on turn 3 for 1 for my Cage. But I felt like I need to dig for the Whir. I can't just assume I'm going to draw one off the Visions. But that means that now that I found it, I can play out the Sword of the Meek. I also messed up. I was thinking that I'm probably going to lose this game, and I didn't want to reveal too much information to my opponent. So I didn't want to show black mana, so that's why I didn't play the Shores over fetching for an island here. But I realized I'm not going to concede if he doesn't kill me, so it didn't actually end up mattering. Opponent has 2 guys, which is terrifying. They have 3 guys, which our hope is now kind of that their hand is terrible, right? Because they can literally cast Gifts for 1 mana. They can cast Passive Flames for 1 mana. So they don't. I kind of think they might have a Passive Flames. They just don't have any Rituals. but I actually might die to 5 damage a turn. So I'm trying to whir for a sword or a foundry. They remand it, so we wait. And I keep up the whir because if they cast Past in Flames somewhere, I want to whir in response for a cage. And if they do not, then I would like to whir for my Thopter foundry. So they started doing some stuff, just chaining off a bunch of cantrips. I fully expect them to now have Past in Flames. And I'm under like actually a lot of pressure with these stupid little 2/2s and stuff. I just kind of flooded out a lot, but I again go for looking for a foundry and kind of just hope their hand's bad, right? And maybe I can gain enough life and go off with the foundry. But they have another. I also wanted to eat one of these guys, but they have another remand, which is very bad for us. So that's very difficult to beat. So I again tend to get a Thopter Foundry here, and they just have gifts, which is real bad. Can't really do a lot about that. So I get rid of the remand again because I can't actually interact with it, and let them keep the Past in Flames. Now I have to basically get a cage to be able to kill them, but I'm in a really bad spot because if I get a cage, then I'm just going to die to this damage here next turn, unless I just draw a Thopter Foundry. But they end up actually, I think I cut it off, but they end up having a Grape Shot to be able to get me here too, so it didn't actually matter. Alright, on. Alright, so in sideboarding against Storm, what's actually kind of weird is I've been messing with this board a lot, and Thopter combo is just so terrible. The pieces individually do nothing against them. You don't really have the time to spend your turn 2 doing something like that. You really need to interact a lot more. Welding Jar is good because they normally bring in Shattering Spree, so it's like okay. If they kind of choke someone mana a little bit. The mana acceleration's fine. It's not super great. I keep it in because I'm bringing in chalices to again try and put chalice on 2. I sometimes trim moxes and stuff, but I basically want, I don't want these. I want Thought Seizes, Decays for their guys so they can't be countered. Maelstrom Pulse is medium in the fact that it kills a guy that reduces their mana costs, but very good in the fact that it kills goblins, right? So it's another answer to goblins. Because I'm siding out all my ways to actually kill them, bring in another Tez. I also bring in Padim because it stops the spree. Some people have other ways to interact with you, but normally it's really Shattering Spree. And Witchbane Orb is fine against their damage-based one, and then Chalices are great. Right, so I bring in a ton of cards. So I cut, this is 12 cards. I also cut most of the Moxes. They just don't really, because I'm cutting all these artifacts, right? Moxes aren't always on. And then I normally trim a bridge. So I would actually, originally I would cut all the bridges or cut down to 1 bridge so you can whir for it. But they keep hands where they can just put in 8 goblins on turn 2. And that's very bad. So you basically need to like Brutality into bridge to have a chance in that game. So I keep in a second bridge there because they also could just kill the first bridge with their smash, and now you don't have, or the Shattering Spree, and now you don't have another way to stop them. So it's not great. I think it's just slightly better than a Mox Opal or any of these pieces, right? So this is how I would normally board for Storm. And then in the game, let's go back here. So this is game 2 against Storm. The hand's pretty good, right? Look for stuff, find another Brutality, which is good. We bottomed the other cards. I think just kind of looking for like a Chalice or something. Draw another Brutality. It's kind of weird now because I don't really just want a 2-mana to rest them. I probably should have, but I know I'm going to need to discard cards at some point here, so I'd rather give them time to build a hand better. And I'd rather actually kill a guy. So again, we end up drawing a Decay. So I think for a while about actually just keeping the Decay up, but let's let's open that up and talk about it. So I end up just brutalitying them and taking the Echoing Truth. And it's kind of a weird decision because they have two guys, right? They have a Manamorphous and a Ritual, and then Shattering Spree. So they don't actually have any card advantage. They have this Spree that we arguably can't beat. Like we have the Welding Jar, but I mean, it's not going to stop it. So the reason I take this is if next turn they're just going to go play a guy, hold up Echoing Truth to bounce their own guy, which will counter essentially our brutality to brutality their guy and kill them, or our Abrupt Decay. And I expect them to go play Baral and then do that, and I don't have another way to kill Baral. Right, so I need to basically take the Truth in order to kill this Baral, because I have so many removal spells, but I just can't kill the Baral if they Echoing Truth to bounce it. So I take the Truth. I end up playing the Baral first, right? Baral's definitely a much better card. I still don't play out my 0-drops because I'm thinking I might pitch them to Brutality. Not really sure yet. End up drawing Prism, so we kill their guy. And so we know this information. I guess it doesn't keep up what I did over here, but we basically this is awful. I think we know they have like these cards. Something like this. So we play out our stuff so that I can now actually play this Tez because I needed the Mox for an extra mana piece. It's kind of awkward because I would have preferred to do that earlier, but so I could attack for 5, but play the dude. This is a very scary turn because they actually start to go off, and I'm assuming I'm just dead because they have this stuff. As soon as they cast Visions, I was pretty sure I was okay. And so I think they have these 3 cards, and we don't know the other 2. So let's just talk about this for a second. So they do a Gifts for Manamorphous, Pieces, and Ritual. I end up giving them the 2 Rituals because I think that they can't go off this turn, even with the 2 Rituals. I don't believe they can, right? If they had a red mana, then they can. They didn't have a land yet, so I think I'm dead to that. And I intend to brutality them out and kind of card advantage them and take their guy and do some stuff. So I can't just give them 2 really good pieces here. And I think that if I give them the Manamorphous and they didn't have red mana, and I thought they might have an island, then they can actually just go off with the Rituals anyway, right? Because they can turn into red mana and go off. So I do this to try and keep their card advantage low. And intending to double brutality them this turn. So I do the first one. I know their hand has a remand in it, so I do the first one to take the remand so that the next one I can kick it and be able to kill their guy and take a card. They still have this Shattering Spree, which is annoying. And then whiff on Tez, also annoying. Probably should have just made a 5/5, but still look like I don't have any cards, and they have 5-ish, so I'm looking for some action. So their hand is, let's get rid of a bunch of these. So we know something like 2 Past in Flames, and so 2 Past in Flames, a Ritual, and a Shattering Spree. So I get a Whir, which is likely going to have to get a Cage, and then I just kind of 5 him and trying to kill him with Tez now. So I intend for him to cast Past in Flames. I get a Cage. He doesn't have the mana to stop my stuff too much, and I can Welding Jar to protect it. So my plan wasn't even to get a Cage. It was to get a Relic so that he can't even Shattering Spree, and I'll exile his whole graveyard. Now he's just stuck with some crappy Past in Flames. Because for him to go off, he has to cast his first Ritual. So now his hand is literally Past in Flames, and Spree. And I just have a Tez. So this exiling his whole graveyard gives me a card, and his hand does actual nothing. He just doesn't have any Rituals anymore. So I end up worrying for 1, and I think he concedes in response. So he knows that he's going to be dead. And on to game 3. Alright, so game 3. Really weird thing is I'm on the play, meaning that my opponent chose to be on the draw, right? Because this is a grindy matchup, arguably. He's realized that now. and he chose to be on the draw. So I still kind of want to be on the play because I have to be able to break serve in his interaction, but really interesting to see that in Modern of people choosing to be on the draw. Just interaction pieces, waiting for our opponent to do something, play out our piece to decide where we're going from here. Plays a brawl. I have a weird choice to either kill his guy or play our Tez. And it's kind of weird, but I end up killing his guy because he could just kill me with 7 cards in his hand. I also shock ourselves so that way we don't have to waste one of these. I might need it for some of the bigger pieces. Pieces of the puzzle is just really good sideboard card for them. Gain all that card advantage and just throw a bunch of cards in the yard. We get to play our Tez though, and I think we knew he picked up a remand, right? So what did it reveal? Yeah, so we knew he picked up a remand, and he actually got rid of a gifts, which is terrifying, which means that his hand is likely already got a gifts or already has a Past in Flames. So I either need to kill him very quickly. I don't think that this brutality is going to stop his hand because it seems like he has some redundancy. It's basically going to try and have to kill one of his creatures. So player Tez gets some damage going. He plays another guy. Again, this is a scary turn where I think he's going off, but then he goes for a pieces rather than a gifts. Like if he had a gifts here, I think we're just dead. So he had the second pieces. He didn't really want the gifts, and he tries to chain off for a bit, and he grape shots us. Really, really interesting mistake from our opponent here is, so his plan is to grape shot us, kill the Tez, and then the rest of us. And then he's going to use his mana, and he's going to remand his spell, right? So he keeps it for next turn. That makes perfect sense. So that means that he doesn't really have any other spells that are free. But what's funny is the way this plays out is if he would have remanded this spell first before these resolve and he decides if he wants to redirect damage or not, he would have realized that he's actually going to draw a land off of this remand. And if he would have kept if he would have not dealt the 2 to Tez, he would have had Storm of like 9, and he'd be able to just kill me, right? So if he just dealt 1 more damage to me, I would have died that turn. So he actually gives me a turn to untap that I shouldn't have had if he would have just slightly sequenced better, right, to just actually remand his thing first. Just kind of really minor. So I'm at this spot now where like he's got so much stuff going on. I can only play 1 of my spells this turn. The trick is I also know he has a remand, right? Because he's gotten like another remand off that pieces. So it's kind of bad because I need to kill his guy. So I take a weird line to earlier in the game. He ended up not remanding when I just did it for 1 mode, and I really want to do it for 2 modes. I don't really care about the cards in my hand, so I actually kick this to give him a really juicy target to remand, so that he also doesn't have a way to build Storm next turn or something dumb. He ends up having a negate though, and we basically just can't beat that card. If it was a remand though, he remands this, I then use 2 mana, do it again, kick it, and get our opponent to 5. He basically needs to kill us from 10, which I think he probably can't. But finding a negate's really, really good. So it's still not guaranteed that we're dead from here. He basically has to kill us this turn, and I think his hand ends up being like Manamorphosis Ritual, Past in Flames, Remand, and the whatever spell kills us, right? The Storm spell. So end up having the Past in Flames or drawing into it the Manamorphosis, we just lose. So Storm's really hard. Noticed that like I interacted with him a bunch of times and I still didn't win. Chalice is so important in this matchup to be able to have something to lock the game up with. Ironically, to our opponent choosing to be on the draw was really important, right? They had an extra card. The game was all about card advantage, so really good playing by our opponent there. Except for where he could have killed us a turn earlier if he would have just been a little bit more heads up. All right, on to final. All right, so this last round's really funny. Because so I end up mulliganing a hand that has 1 land as just like basic swamp. This hand's really sketch as well, has 1 land, Serum Visions. So I'm hoping this is going to help me find something. I also know that there's certain decks that just can't beat a Cage, and I also know that there's certain decks that can't beat a Bridge. So these 2 cards are very powerful that if I find lands, I can still stabilize this game. and we have the visions to kind of look for them. So we bottom a Foundry, keep a land, and our opponent is playing Merfolk. So again, one of those matchups that bridge is very, very good. So we play our visions first. Again, just looking for more lands. Really don't want to draw these 3-mana spells because I can't get bridge low enough. You kind of need to keep bridge at 1 or 0 against this matchup. Our opponent has Lord of Atlantis, jams on us. Cage literally does nothing, right? Just trying to get stuff out of my hand. We go through this game. He has Kira. We keep playing our stuff. And I actually end up not drawing lands and getting stuck with too many cards in my hand. And our opponent has us dead on board here. And I go like a kind of like a last-ditch effort to whir for 2. For our opponent to just kind of think, because if he sacks this guy, I have the ability to draw a collective brutality, to then go brutality, pitching 2 things, and getting below bridge, and just, I mean, look at his hand. I don't even care if I guess this would counter it, but I get to pitch 2 cards, right? So, as Lee says, discard 3 cards, I'm game for that. So if he does counter this, I have an out, and if he doesn't, I don't really have any outs. So, I end up whirring for 2. Our opponent is smart enough to not counter this. So I get a bobble and say, I'll just look at his top card. Which is funny because it's actually like a relevant card. It's a Smuggler's Copter. I don't really think I can make any decisions based off of that. But just interesting that he has it. So the reason this game is funny is our opponent actually starts messaging us because he tells us that he played against this deck in Roanoke. And he said that it was actually his only loss in Roanoke, and he ended up winning the Classic, and his only loss was the Tezzerator deck. And the reason that's funny is that it was me that he played against. And he actually talked to me a lot about the deck, and he added me on Facebook. We were talking for a while about it, and it's just funny that we randomly ran into each other in Moto Comp League in the 5th round, and the fact that we talked about people that we've already played. So I tell him that it's me, and we now have a laugh about that, which he clearly doesn't want to play because I was his only loss. But let's go to game 2, because he's already a game up on me, which is pretty. So sideboarding for Merfolk is a bit interesting. Basically, the only card that matters is bridge. Thopter Founders are like this combo is fine, and sometimes it'll win you a game, but they just have their guys be unblockable, right? Because of Violent Walk. So you'd have to have a really weird draw for a Thopter Founder to be great. Time Save's kind of the other way, where they have ways to bounce your bridge, so you do need a way to close out the game relatively quickly, and Time Save can help you do that too. Some people also play Hercules, which is annoying. I remember this opponent, and I remember him not playing Hercules whenever we talked about it, and he just kind of assumed he'd be dead to bridge if he played against it. But I'm still going to sideboard it under the assumption that on Moto he might be playing Hercules. I'm not positive. Might have just been a decision for that meta there. So I board in a way that Relic doesn't do anything, Cage doesn't do anything, Jars don't do anything, and we bring in. So I bring in the Damnation. I actually bring in the Thought Seizes because the cards I'm actually worried about are Echoing Truth, Hercules, Recall, maybe a Counterspell or something like that, because I really just need to stick a bridge at a key point. So I bring in these 3. I don't bring in Decays because I'm not really trying to kill his guys 1 for 1. I don't think it does enough, and it's something where like Brutality is good because I can get my bridge lower and I can take a spell, but I'm not really trying to just kill his lures or something like that. And I could be wrong, and I want to be able to block him with Thopters, but I chose not to. And then I brought in the Padim, I believe, because you don't need to be. Padim's kind of weird because if you need a bridge on 0, it's very dangerous because you could just draw 2 lands. But against this matchup, you need normally like a bridge on 2-ish cards in your hand to be able to stop all his guys from attacking. So I bring this in. It also, again, stops some of the bounce spells. I also bring in a Witchbane Orb, and because this card is phenomenal at just. I don't know if I bring in the Padim here. I might, but the Witchbane Orb is very, very good against Hercules, and basically just that, right? So if my whole plan is he might have a Hercules, I'm using protecting the bridges and you use Witchbane Orb in response because Hercules says target player. So in response, you were for Witchbane Orb and you can counter the Hercules. I've done that a ton of times, but it's just kind of speculative in this matchup that if they have Hercules on their board, this card's fine. Otherwise, it's going to be really terrible, actually. That doesn't do anything. So But I bring in that. So to the game. So I'm down a game. I actually think for a while in this hand because, I mean, arguably against any opponent, this hand's very good, right? It can make Thopters and just have kind of the nut draw and then an interaction piece. So the other weird thing is I'm really thinking about, so I brought in that Glimmer Void, right? I'm thinking about, is there a way that I can fetch lands in a certain way to go like Swamp, Glimmer Void, not need to expose an island, so that way his lords can't have Island Walk? And ultimately, I decide that even if I can do that, I'm just only going to get like 2 Thopters a turn, which isn't enough. I can kill the first lord with the brutality, so I'm just ultimately not thinking that that's a great way to play this game. So I end up just I still am not positive on on my decision of can I keep the lord off the table after drawing another land. I know I can't. That's why I didn't fetch at end step because I was still not sure if I could stay away from getting another island. One thing that's really gross here that so our opponent doesn't do it, but I'm pretty worried about it is if he just Echoing Truce our Foundry, our Glimmer Void dies, right? So it's really annoying. But I also play it out in a way that means that he doesn't have an Echoing Truth for our later on bridge or for all our Thopters. So he could just basically strip mine us, and I think he actually mulligans. So I'd be okay with that. But he ends up not doing it or not having it. Plays his Lord. And so now we're actually kind of worried because we have an island, right? He has a Lord. I'm drawing a bunch of lands, which is normally pretty good with Thopter combo. I Brutality, discarding a land in the other Thopter Foundry. And looking for whatever his Hercules or his Echoing Truth. He ends up having Echoing Truth, which I am so thankful that I'm taking now because again, at this point, it could bounce all my Thopters so he can win a race. But alternatively, he could still just bounce my Thopter Foundry and strip mine me, and now it's an entire turn, right? It basically counts as Time Walk. So definitely happy that I was able to do that. It's also, our opponent kind of has a weird draw, so we already need the Lord from this thing because he doesn't really do anything. So like Unified Will is going to counter something, right? The card we only have is Sword of the Meek, which we don't really care if it gets countered. The reason I actually wanted to share this video is I made some really interesting decisions in this game. Like one was how I sequenced these lands, which was arguably wrong, but just the thought process going into it. The other one is this, right? So our opponent counters our sword, and he thinks actually about it for a while. He counters it. I then Serum Vision's not playing my land, hoping that our opponent counters this because I want to draw a whir and be able to use the whir without any issues to be able to whir and get something else, get my other sword. I do draw the whir, which is really good, and our opponent does not counter it. These cards don't do anything. Sorry, the bridge is very good, and the land doesn't do anything. So this worked out very well for us, right? I wanted our opponent to counter our sword, so that way my whir, my bridge that I find later on are very good. We end up finding both. I also wanted him to counter this, so that way if I find the whir, that it doesn't get stopped, because I really just want to kind of get like a bridge going or a sword going. So I keep the bridge on top. I probably should have kept the land on top too. Just kind of figured I might whir here soon. And this is where things get weird. So our opponent attacks into us. So I sack my Thopter Foundry, get a guy, and return our sword. And I'll trade the Thopter Foundry, especially because we have the whir to build it back up. I'll trade the Thopter Foundry to get a 2/3 and kill his guy. He ends up drawing a Vial, so he already used the counter. So he didn't hit a land. We know that he has a Harbinger, so I don't really want to attack because then he's just going to kill our guy, so we didn't really get any value out of that. And I want to keep the artifacts around for whir. So I intend to end step whir, get a Thopter Founder, make a guy, which is what we do. And now we kind of have this bridge as a backup plan, right? We don't need the bridge to win. We're at such a high life total, we have the bridge as a backup plan. We can just kill him with some Thopters. So like I said, normally these games don't play out where Thopters just get them. Our opponent kind of had an anemic draw. He stumbled for a bit, drew Vial whenever he'd rather draw a land at this point in the game. And like he had key cards like Unified Will and Echoing Truth. It's just I had Brutality, which was still quite strong against it. So the rest of this game, we just make a bunch of Thopters. So it's, I mean, even if our opponent has an interaction spell for this, then it would be very hard for him to win. But it kind of gets back to the point I talked about earlier, where Like, the only spell he could have that would do anything here is Hercules, which would wipe our board, kill our land, set us back. We have now too many cards in hand, so Bridge doesn't actually stop him. It just gets real weird. So the only card that I think actually beats us, it doesn't even beat us, but it's annoying here, is Hercules. So, but first off, our opponent doesn't have it, and second off, I think we draw worse. So if he does have Hercules, we're still fine. So, make a bunch of guys, and I think he vials in his Glenalandra, or not Glenalandra, Kira, and blocks to go to 1. And I have these 2 cards that I don't think he can beat, but it's just we don't need to show him extra cards. We're just gonna kill him with Thopters. So, all right, and on to game 3. All right, so this is game 3 against Merfolk, final round of competitive Modern League. So this hand has Bridge, which is great, and these Serum Visions are going to spin my wheels for a bit in the beginning, but that's the plan. So I ended up bottoming something and then keeping a Brutality on top, right, intending to kill his turn 2 play. If he doesn't play a turn 2 guy, which means Merfolk, so normally he should, I'll play my Prism and have a ton of mana coming up. He does play a turn 2 guy, which is, I mean, it's exactly what we want him to do, right? So I Brutality him, and then looking for a card, and our opponent actively he's just like super frustrated. He's like, oh no, because that was his only guy. So we look at his hand, Echoing Truth, Dispel, Unified Will. I take the Unified Will, even though he has no creatures, because he's just going to go Mutavault, use the Mutavault to make it a creature, and then Unified Will our spell. So he kind of has this, like, 3 mana counter spell, and we don't really care about the Truth because he has no pressure. This is just a tempo play, and we can always thoughts use it later. The spell does actual nothing because we only have the 4 whirs. We already have the Bridge, so it's kind of weird that we don't have any pressure, right? But we have a lock, and we have some protection from that. Opponent then ends up, I mean, we draw lands. Opponent ends up drawing some lands there, too. We just kind of get our Bridge going. And chip shots us a little bit here, but we just start dumping our hand. Find actually another Bridge, which is weird because it's not very good against that Echoing Truth. But now he thought he's the Truth. He drew another land too. We play a Sword. I think we just kept a Whir on top as well. So, or no, we kept a Thopter Foundry on top. So I actually kept, I think I kept Thopter Foundry Island on top in that order. So now here I draw the Thopter Foundry. I don't actually intend to fetch away the island because I just want another land. It'll help me kill him quicker. But he can't beat, I mean, this lock at this point. So it just doesn't have anything going, and it's just a Dispel or a land in his hand. So good games overall. I think the deck just performs really well. I've obviously got a little bit lucky in some of these games. A little bit unlucky in some of the games too. But I definitely think the 21st land was good because just so many of these games in the early game I'm looking for a land. Or I lose games where I have a Thopter Foundry and combo in like 3 lands, and it's just for some reason not enough. Or like I need to be able to bridge them, and I can't because I can't play all my spells, and it just doesn't do anything. So pretty confident with the 21st land. I've also liked it being a Glimmer Void because, or I mean, it could be a Spire of Industry, but the Glimmer Void has been pretty strong on just having another green source. I've had an opponent who had a Stony Silence, and he Ghost Quartered away my breeding pool. And then I was able to draw the Glimmer Void and just actually still kill his stuff and go off. So having another green source was pretty strong. I only had that come up once, but I mean, it felt really good when I did it. So it's got to be right then. But thank you all for watching. Definitely post this out on YouTube and hopefully do some more. Thanks.